How many of you have tried to get a used car or a new car recently? Anybody tried to get it? People have lost their minds these days. My son was going to go off for his sophomore year of college at Baylor, and so he's going to live off campus. We got to get a car for him. We're kind of navigating this new territory. So we decided that we're going to go out and buy him a used Honda Civic. So in this day and age, we just thought, oh, that won't be too hard, right? So we looked on Car Gurus. I don't know if you've ever been on that website, just another used car website. We found a used Honda Civic, great price, under 100,000 miles. I mean, it's like a billion years old, but under 100,000 miles. We call Huntington Beach. We're like, hey, do you have that car in stock? Like, is it still there? And they're like, yeah, it's still here, but you better come quick because they sell fast. So we're like, okay, Huntington Beach. Like, we're going to leave right away. So we left right away. We got there in about an hour. We got there, and the car had already sold. So we're like, okay, well, that's probably kind of a fluke. We were in Huntington Beach. We looked up Car Gurus again. We were like, okay, there's probably a car someplace else. We found another used Honda Civic under 100,000 miles in Carson. So we call Carson. Good, you guys know your geography. This is fantastic. I did not know where Carson was. I was like, it's probably right down the street. So I call Carson, and I'm like, hey, I'm looking at this used Honda Civic. You guys got it in stock? They're like, yeah, we got it in stock. We drive there immediately from Huntington Beach to Carson. The car had already sold. So then we call Montclair. And we're like, do you have the car in stock? They said, we have the car in stock. And by the time we got there, the car had sold. I spent 5 hours of my day trying to buy a used car, thinking I was going to come away with a used car, but I did not come away with a used car. So I gave him my used car, and now I'm looking for a new car. And last week I told you guys I was looking for a Tesla. I'm not going to get a Tesla. Wah, wah. That stinks. Life sucks, right? Oops, I shouldn't have said that. Anyway, how many months to get a Tesla? Anybody? 6 months to get a Tesla. So go to the Honda dealership. They're like, take your pick. No, I'm kidding, because I ended up getting a Honda Accord. Boring. Still, I have to wait a month. I have to wait 2 months for my Honda Accord. It's like, what is going on? You guys know this because whether it be used cars, whether it be new cars, whether it be Teslas, whether it be trucks, whether it be muscle cars, whether it be sports cars, whether it be luxury sedans, there's something about the ethos of Southern California where we all love our cars, don't we? We all love our cars. Here's the crazy thing about a car, especially because I'm in the process of refurbishing and fixing up a 66 Mustang. Pretty cool. I love it. Anyway. Here's what I've realized, that a car is really made out of about 30,000 different parts. 30,000 different parts. Nuts, bolts, screws, rear view mirrors, tailpipes, mufflers, spark plugs, alternators, all of these different things. And yet what we find, this is no surprise to you, but 30,000 different parts that aren't necessarily working independently. In fact, they're not working independently at all. 30,000 different parts, all doing the same thing, all on the same mission, all moving towards the same destination. That is crazy, because I can't even get all 7 of my family members to eat dinner at the same time, okay? And here's the thing. Here's what I want you to know, that the power of the local church is not necessarily how many parts we have in the church or how many people we have in the church. People come up to me all the time and say, how many people are in your church? And I go, I don't know. But the power of the local church is not, that's like somebody coming up to you and going, hey, nice car. How many parts you got in that car? Who cares? Who cares how many parts you have in the car if your car isn't working? If your car isn't moving? If your car isn't all working together, all going in the same direction, right? That's when the local church is powerful. That's when the local church is going to do something. And we've been in this series called Fix, where we've been talking about this thing that we've been calling the Great Commission engine. The Great Commission engine. That, in other words, that there is an engine that is a part of this church that drives everything that we do, and it is everything that we are about as a church. And it just so happens to be something called the Great Commission, which is the last command that Jesus just so happened to give us. And it's this right here. In Matthew chapter 28, verses 18 through 20, it says this. Then Jesus came to them and said, by the way, if you're not too familiar with the Bible, this is after Jesus' death. This is after Jesus' resurrection. The disciples thought that the movement was dead. And all of a sudden, boom, there is Jesus back from the dead. And this is what he has to say. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. So he says, look up, look down, all of it. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. So here's what I want you to do. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations. Here's what you have to understand. The world map as we know it wasn't even produced until the 1500s, okay? These are disciples that have not traveled more than 30 miles away from home. Make disciples of all the world, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you to do. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. That is everything that we are about as a church. Now, one of the things that we have been saying is that there are three different pistons that drive that engine. Number one is the gathering, that we meet on Sunday all together so that we might be able to worship God together as one unit, not individual parts, not a tailpipe, all on their own, all coming together to worship God and to listen to the gospel being preached. Last week, we talked about this idea of surrendered living, that the meaning of my life, that happiness is not necessarily about me just getting a new Tesla, although that would be incredibly awesome, but it's about me surrendering my life on behalf of others and on behalf of God. This week, what I want to do is I want to talk to you about something very, very, very important. I want to talk to you about a word that I believe that all heaven and earth depends upon this one word. I believe that the entire Bible could be summarized in this one word. And you know what that word is? It's this word right here. It's the word relationships. So is that an understatement for me to say that all in heaven and earth depends upon this word? No, because on earth, as go our relationships, so go our life, right? You define the quality of your life oftentimes by the quality of your relationships. And I would say that even when it comes to eternity, it's about who we know. It's about a relationship. It's not about what you know. It's about who you know. Right? That relationships are extremely, extremely, extremely important. In fact, there's a fascinating study about relationships that in 1971, as the Vietnam War was headed into its 16th year, Congressman Robert Steele from Connecticut and Morgan Murphy from Illinois, they made a startling discovery. They found that while visiting the troops in Vietnam, that 35% of service members had tried heroin, and as many as 20% of them were now addicted and using it regularly. But in another study that totally changed, by the way, how we view addiction in America completely, researcher Lee Robbins discovered this conclusion right here. That almost 9 out of 10 soldiers who used heroin in Vietnam eliminated their addiction nearly overnight. That goes against everything that you and I certainly believe about chemical addiction, in particular when it comes to heroin addiction. And the conclusion that they found was this right here. In Vietnam, soldiers spend all day surrounded by cues, in other words, relationships, triggering heroin use. It was easy to access. They were engulfed by the constant stress of war. They had built friendships with fellow soldiers who were also heroin users. And they were also thousands upon thousands upon thousands of miles away from home, where that was more unacceptable. Listen to this. Once a soldier returned to the United States, though, he found himself in an environment or in other relationships devoid of those triggers. And when the environment or when those relationships changed, so did the habit. So all we're trying to say here is that the relationship decisions that we make in our lives, that these are the most important decisions that we can make. That the most impactful decision that you can make and that I can make in my life is who I decide to surround myself. Because the most positive thing that you've ever done in your life was influenced by a relationship. And believe it or not, the most negative thing and the biggest regret you've ever had in your life, believe it or not, revolves around some type of relationship. One person said it like this, that your net worth is determined by your network, right? That your net worth is determined by your network. And Jesus understands this. And so when Jesus understands the value of relationships, he says this, that the real value of life transformation, that in other words, where real life transformation comes from, is that it doesn't come from sitting in a service. Sitting in a service is important, okay? But as Westerners, typically, we think that any transformation comes through logic. As Westerners, we think that any type of transformation or growth typically comes through learning. That's why we love to read. That's why we love to learn. That's why we love to consume content through podcasts and YouTube and all of these other things. When you and I learn something new, we feel like we have grown in the process. How many really, really, really smart people do you know that have made some really, really bad decisions? Jesus knows that life transformation doesn't just happen as I consume content, that life transformation, that it really happens within the context of relationships. Jesus says this himself in Luke chapter 17, verses 1 through 2. Luke chapter 17, verses 1 through 2, it says this right here. Jesus said to his disciples, "Things that cause people to stumble are bound to come." Let me say that one more time. Things that cause people to stumble are bound to come, but woe to anyone through whom they come. That it would be better for him to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around his neck than for him to cause one of these little ones to sin. So watch yourselves. He's saying, so check yourself. Okay? You know what? I'm really jealous of those people who get homeschooled because we didn't have that option when I was a kid. You know, I think that would be so awesome. I'm kind of a homebody. So I would have loved to have my mom homeschool me and stay at home the entire time. Because now these days, you don't even necessarily have to go to college. You can go to virtual college. So I could have stayed at home through all of high school, and then I could have stayed at home through all of college and just, done remote learning. And these days, you don't even have to go to work anymore because you can just work remotely. And so I could have just literally just stayed home. I could have gone from the hospital to going home and then dying in my home and then just going back to the hospital after that. Like for some of you introverts, you're like, that's the best idea I've ever heard. Right? What I'm trying to say is this. That you and I can wrap ourselves in bubble wrap for the rest of our lives. You and I can move to Idaho where we're on a ranch and we've cut off our internet and we're completely off the grid. But according to Jesus, what Jesus is saying is that no matter what you do to yourself, guess what? You're still going to stumble. You're still going to fall. You and I are still going to be one decision away from ruining our lives. That it doesn't matter if you grew up in a Christian home. It doesn't matter if you went to Ontario Christian. It doesn't matter if you went to CBU. It doesn't matter if you work at Chick-fil-A for the rest of your life. that you and I are bound to stumble. And so teens, I would say this, teen students, this is why your parents are so concerned about the kind of friends that you make. Do you know why? Because nobody makes bad decisions all by themselves, right? No sixth grader sits there all by themselves and says, you know what? Like that whole vaping idea sounds really, really, really good. Yeah, that's just a really good idea. No sixth grader sits there and goes, you know what? I really love drinking orange juice, but you know what I really have a craving for right now? I just don't have a category for it. You know, it's something that tastes like leather and tannin with a hint of oak and elderberry. Like, no child ever thinks about that all by themselves, right? It takes relationships in order to get us to that point. Do you know why they call it an acquired taste? Because when you first tasted alcohol, you thought it tasted like the urine of a sea otter. That's why. But it's relationships that made us go, oh, yeah, this isn't that bad. So what I'm trying to say is this, that if parents, is this applicable for teens? Everybody say amen. Okay, if it's applicable for teens, then it's just as applicable for you. That's why I gave that illustration. Because we all think that we're so set in our ways. We think that we're so strong. We think that our character is so set, don't we? And that is until we move to an area, we get a brand new set of friends, and then all of a sudden in that situation, we find ourselves going, church, like, wow, that's something that I used to be a part of, but that's just not really something that I really do all that much anymore. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33, it says this right here. Don't be misled. Okay, adult, don't be misled. What does it say? Bad company corrupts good character. Then, in other words, that has been said like this, that you and I are defined by the company that we keep, right? That you and I are the average of our 5 closest friends. And here's the thing, some of you wives are a little bit concerned today because your husbands, they just seem a little bit distracted. You know, and maybe there's a girl at work, or maybe he's got some new friends at work, or maybe all of a sudden, golf has become a little bit more important on the weekends than it used to be. All of a sudden, he's not really going to church anymore. Here's the problem. You're frustrated, you're frustrated, you're frustrated. You don't know what to do because every time you talk to him, it doesn't seem to do anything. Have you ever experienced that? Your teen has hit a situation. You're frustrated, you're frustrated, you're frustrated because every time you talk to them, it doesn't seem to do anything. Let me tell you why. Here's the problem, but here's the opportunity. Are you ready for it? It's this right here. When the stumbling block is here, we don't listen to family. Did you? When you were 16 years old, and when you were struggling whether or not you should be in a relationship or not, was mommy and daddy the first person that you went to? Oftentimes, what you're going to find is what we need the most is what we actually want the least. And in that moment, sometimes we don't listen to our parents. I'm not saying that we shouldn't. We should. I'm making more of an observation, if you're okay with that. We don't listen to our parents, we don't listen to our husbands, we don't listen to our wives, and this is why it's so extraordinarily important for you and for me to be in some type of structured community that shares my values, so that when it is that I fall down, what these people can do is these people can say, hey, we're not going to let you stay down. That we're going to pick you up. So the wisest man in the world besides Jesus, his name is Solomon. Now, Solomon didn't always follow his own advice, if you know Solomon. But he did have some pretty wise things to say. Solomon said this right here in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 9. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 9 says this, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. That, in other words, that even thousands of years ago, here's what they realized, that 1 person can do 1 person's work, but 2 people, they can actually do 3 persons' work. Do you know what that's called? That's called synergy, right? The two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. The next verse, verse 10, it says this, that if they fall down or if they stumble, they can help each other up. But listen to this. Pity those who fall and have no one to help them up. So in other words, pity them. They are to be pitied. Pity the fourth grader. Pity the junior higher. Pity the high schooler. Pity the college freshman. Pity the person that not if they stumble, but when they stumble, that they only have their work buddies, that they only have their football friends, that they only have a set of bitter divorce ladies who are going to the Maverick Bar every single night, okay? Now, I got nothing against the Maverick Bar, but a bar that puts a nativity scene out in front of it every Christmas, I don't know. That kind of freaks me out a little bit, honestly. You know? Pity the person. I'm not saying any of these things are bad people. You guys are getting me, right? But pity the person who only has these people in their life and has no other group of people that surrounds them with good Christian values, who can point them to God, who aren't mommy and daddy that they're not going to go to in the moment. And who will say, you know what, man, you're down, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to love you through this. We're going to pray you through this, and we will not let you stay down. Let me tell you what's the most difficult phone call we get here at church. The most difficult phone call we get here at church is somebody calling us saying, you've got to talk to my 16-year-old. I just can't get through to him. You've got to talk to my husband. He's just daggum lost his mind. You've got to talk to my wife. I think she's drinking too much. I think she's taking too many prescription drugs. Can I tell you this? Our conversation with that person usually doesn't go that well either. Do you know why? Because we don't have a relationship with them. We may have authority, but so do you. And the first question that we always ask that person in that moment, sounds weird, is this question right here. Are you in a community group? 99 times out of 10, the answer is no. Because if they were in a community group, we probably wouldn't get that call to begin with, okay? Can I tell you this? Parents, you were crazy. Parents, you are missing out on the opportunity of a lifetime if you don't send your kids to Hume. If you don't send your kids to VP Youth, okay? And I know why you don't. I get it. Like, we try and provide all the greatest experiences for our kids, except for sometimes the greatest spiritual experience that they might be able to have in their life. Because my kids come back from Hume every single year and they say, Daddy, I'm so glad you sent me because it was life-changing. Okay, I know why you don't send them. Because you know what the coach said? The coach said that if they miss a week of preseason, what's going to happen is they're not going to play. Okay, can I ask you a question for a second? When was the last time a coach said this? Hey, assistant coach, I'm having a really hard time setting the starting lineup. Can you bring me the attendance sheet? A coach doesn't do that. You know what a coach does? A coach goes like this. Who's the best person that's going to give us the opportunity to play? And I assure you, if they are good, they are going to play. If they are not good, they are not going to play. I don't know if that's bad news for you. But even aside from that, can I tell you this? Even if they play, there's a Bible verse for that. You know what it's called? It's called this. What does it profit a high school kid to play varsity football and yet never go to church in college? Because once they got off to college, their entire church experience was all tied to mommy and daddy. And once mommy and daddy is gone, guess what? So is their faith. So all I'm trying to say is this. pity the 10th grader. Pity the 11th grader. Pity the high schooler who, when they struggle with porn, when she gets broken up with, when he struggles with depression, and when she starts cutting herself, that they don't have Christian and Jessica's phone number. Pity the high schooler who doesn't have Ian Carr as his small group leader, who's a young adult and who seems like the coolest person in the world because he looks and talks a lot cooler than you do. And as a young adult, when he says something, your child listens. And then what happens is they come home and they go, you know what Ian Carr told me? Ian Carr told me this. And you're like, I've been telling you that for 10 years. He's stupid compared to me. I want you to think about what difference this would have made in your family of origin. My dad had an anger problem. I love my dad. But my dad was an immigrant man who worried about money and had a lot of stress on his life. And I do not hold that against him to any stretch of the imagination. But was your dad the same way? Because what difference would it have made in your family of origin if your dad had a group of men around him who were willing to say, hey, here's what we're going to do. Man, we're not going to let you mess this up. We are not going to let you medicate your way out of this. We are not going to let you affair your way out of this. We are going to be with you until the very end because we don't want you, because you will always be one decision away from screwing up your life. Maybe you're on your second marriage. Maybe you're on your third marriage. Maybe it was all your fault. Maybe it was none of your fault. I don't know. But what if your ex-wife, when she came to you and said, hey, I'm going to go out dancing with the girls tonight, and you were like, is that really a good idea? She wouldn't listen to you anyway. What if you had another group of girls in your ex-wife's life who went, hey, is that really a good idea? You know, to go to a place where everyone's drunk, to go dancing without your husband, really? Yeah, is that a good idea? That's part of the reason why you and I need something called, it's a churchy word, I'm going to use it. That's why we need something called Christian fellowship. We use fellowship typically to talk about fun and food. But fellowship isn't about fun and food. Fellowship is about different types coming together under the same mission. It's a car. It's a car that's driving. You know who got that word right? J.R.R. Tolkien. In the Fellowship of the Ring. Different types coming together, all moving in the same direction. Acts chapter 2, verse 42, it says this about the early church, that they devoted themselves not only to the teaching, because this is what we do. We want to read. We want to consume content. We want to watch YouTube. We want to listen to a podcast, because that's what it means to grow. But then all of a sudden, that Bible verse goes a little bit further than that, and it says this, that they grew in content, that they grew in mind, but they also grew in fellowship as a family. And single people, any single people here, I want you to write this down for a second. This one's free, this one's powerful, and you don't have to tithe on it, okay? When you get married, you don't marry an individual, you marry a family. Can I get an amen to that? Okay, so what I want to say is this, that if she's hot, but her family is crazy, you need to run the other direction as fast as you can, okay? If all of his brothers are in prison, you need to think long and hard about that one. Because you don't marry an individual, you marry into a family. And let me tell you this, when you invite Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you don't just get Jesus. You know what you get? You get his crazy family along with it. And there's some crazy uncles that are a part of this family. And I hear this all the time. I hear this all the time. People saying, I love Jesus. I love Jesus. I just can't stand the church. And you know what that's like? That's like me going to my wife and saying, honey, baby girl, I love you. I love you so much. But all these kids, they have got to go. You know, that 10-year-old girl, she's cute, but she snores like really loud. And our 14-year-old, he literally thinks he's a bear, okay? So, no, they have got to go, right? But can I tell you this? That's how many of you are with Jesus. You're like, I love you, Jesus. I'm all about you. I want to get saved, but this family, it's got to go. And can I tell you this? Jesus and this family come as a package deal, okay? You take it or you leave it. I understand that it's hard to be a part of a family. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's so worth it. So that's why in 2 weeks, we're going to be starting a series called How Not to Be Your Own Worst Enemy. We're going to watch video about what that's like in a little bit. But man, here's what I've realized through the years, that I've always thought that somebody else was the enemy until I realized that really it's the voice in my head. That's the real enemy. That's the real harshest critic that I have. It's not the person who calls me crazy over email. It's me. And whether you're a Christian or whether you're not a Christian, guess what? You and I can all identify with that. So in 2 weeks, we're going to be starting a great spiritual growth campaign where everybody on our church is going to be on the same page, rowing in the same direction, driving towards the same destination. And so here's what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to build a Christian community. We got the community group starter kits in today. And so here's what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to circle up with 5 or 6 of your buddies and look at this. Look at all the good stuff we got in here. Look at all the good stuff. We got a quick start guide. So you're like, I don't know what to do. Just read the guide. Just read the instructions. And that'll tell you everything there is to know. We have little invite cards right here. We have the curriculum and what it is that you guys are going to do. Even if you don't know very much about the Bible, let me tell you what's going to happen. What you're going to do is you're just going to go like this. Hey, I'm going to pretend like I know a lot about the Bible. So you just read question number 1. Can you do that? You read question number 2. Can you do that? Everybody will think you're really smart. Like you don't even have to say anything. You just ask people to do everything else. Just like your boss, okay? You can act like the boss of your small group. So here's what we're asking you to do. You don't just need podcasts. You don't just need sermons. I know that you listen to all these different sermons from all around the nation. But let me tell you, content consumption is not how you grow. You grow within the context of other people who can challenge you and keep you accountable. So if you're not in a group, what we want you to do is we want you to go ahead, grab this starter kit, just grab 5 or 6 of your friends because maybe you live in Lake Elsinore, maybe you live in Corona, maybe you kind of feel like, a Vantage Point small group, date, time, it's just too far. I just can't do it. You're on the ball field, just grab one of these, just grab 5, 6 of your friends, super duper easy. Now for some of you are like, but I don't really want to start anything. Like some of you would say, I'm kind of new to this church and I want to actually get to know somebody in this church that I don't know already. Well, if that's you, you can go ahead and join a group. That's fine. We have 50, 60, I think now 70 different groups that are a part of this church, different days, different times, different life stages, different locations. We'd love for you to be able to sign up for that. Easiest way to do that is we have a QR code. We don't have a QR code. We don't have a QR code. All you have to do is go out to the back, grab a box, sign up for a group, do whatever you want. Here's what we need other people in our life. Here's a quick video to watch what it is that's coming up.
Okay. So my name is Eric Oliver, and I definitely can remember a time where I was my own worst enemy. It was when I had a fitness center. I ended up having it for about 12 years. And I remember when we first got started, there was a lot of success that we had. And that success drove me to some behaviors that ended up self-sabotaging myself. I became really greedy about trying to make money to provide for my family. I didn't do things always in the best interest of my family. I was looking to make the most money as I possibly could. and I made some decisions that didn't include God. And that's what ended up costing me my business in the end. We were looking to relocate, and during that time of searching for a better location, my wife had told me no. She told me not to move, but I kind of disregarded, I disregarded what she said. I thought I knew better because I was in business, and I decided to go ahead and move from our location. Well, what ended up happening is that after I relocated and I thought God had opened the doors for that location, we ended up having a judgment on us from the previous owner for vacating that property. All the money in the account was gone, and we thought that it was just a glitch or a mess up. And that was one of the first times that I realized that it came back to haunt me. In that time, those decisions that I had made led us to the gym really struggling financially, to the point where we were going to lose our house. And I had to end up telling my wife and my kids that we were going to be losing our house and that we were going to be moving. And we had looked around for apartments and places to relocate. And God, as faithful as He is and as forgiving as He is, came through with the miracle. We had to file bankruptcy, but we were able to keep our home and stay in our home, and we're there to this day. I was attending church, but I really wasn't into my Bible. My prayer life wasn't as strong as it needed to be. And I made the decisions based off of business, but not actually stopping and pausing and praying over each decision that I made and asking the Lord to guide me and direct me in my steps. And that ultimately was the downfall, was not including God in that. Our house was spared, and we were able to stay in our house because we tithed. I remember having conversations with my wife, and there were some family members that were helping us look over our bills and saying, this is what you need to cut. And I remember on several occasions, one of them was the amount of money that we were tithing. And they said that you can't do that. You've got to put that money elsewhere. And my wife and I looked at each other and we said, well, we can't afford not to tithe. And I truly believe to this day that that was one of the main reasons that we were able to stay in our home, is because we honored God with our finances. And I think that really helped us to get through, because God remained faithful to us because we remained faithful to Him.